In this episode of OG55, we have a special guest with us today. LucasKim has returned to the channel. Awesome having Lucas back on. We also have the Italiano as usual, Mr. Italiano. Today we were talking about the Polynesian, that DVC 10-story tower. We're going to talk more about Tokyo Fantasy Springs. We're also going to talk about the Lakeside Lodge. Just like Palpatine, somehow it returned. Right? And we have a lot to discuss here today with, again, special guest LucasKim up next on OG55. Welcome aboard, everybody, to another episode of OG55. We have a fantastic show for you today. But before we dive in, I want to introduce my fantastic panel. Lucas is back, second time on the channel. Lucas, it's good to see you, man.
Thank you for inviting me again. I really do appreciate talking with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure. If you can remind everybody where they can find you on social media.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, aka X. The username is it's LucasKim. Also, if you want to find me on YouTube, there's a Linktree link below, and my Disney YouTube user is a Lucas and Disney channel.
Perfect. So yeah, I'll link everything down below. So make sure you follow him. I've been following Lucas now for a little while, a few months at least, and he has amazing insight on the company, on Disney, overall entertainment stuff, really good stuff. So make sure you give him a follow and show all the love to Mr. LucasKim. And the Italiano is back. George, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing good. It's always a good time being here on Orange Grove 55, having these in-depth discussions with everyone. And yeah, it's always a good time.
Absolutely. If you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There is. All right. First topic of the day is the Poly. George and I, we stayed there this past summer. Beautiful resort. Really beautiful resort. And this is the kind of stuff that really does set Walt Disney World from Disneyland. You know what I'm saying? This is the bread and butter of Walt Disney World, I think. But Scott Gustin, of course, Mr. Scott Gustin, we love him. He's awesome. He says here, new Disney Vacation Club revealed a new look at the Island Tower at Disney's Polynesian Villas and Bungalows, set to open at Walt Disney World in December 2024. So DVC members can book hotel stays starting June 4th, followed by annual pass holders June 5th, and all guests on June 6th. And again, this is a 10-story tower. Okay, so it'll feature duo studios, deluxe studios, 1-bedroom villas, 2-bedroom villas, and new 2-bedroom penthouse villas. Okay, so interesting stuff. Now, George, I'll start with you. What are your overall thoughts on the look of this expansion, this DVC expansion, inside and outside, and how it relates to the existing, resort and everything like that?
So I'll start with, this has been a little bit of a controversial topic in the Disney community, whether or not the aesthetics for this new DVC is appropriate, so to speak, for the Polynesian Village Resort. Because I know Disney has been kind of on this trajectory of, making things very simplistic, very, just kind of modern, nothing really overall themed, to what the resort is. And personally,
minimalist is the official, I think, minimalist designs, where it's very like clean cut, not a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, the Polynesian is one of my top favorite Walt Disney World resort hotels on property, bar none. So for me, if you're going to do something with the Poly, it is very highly vamped in storytelling, down to honestly the smells. As soon as you enter into the main lobby, like, you could blindfold me and I could tell you like exactly what resort hotel we're in, and the Poly is no exception. I love the overall aesthetics, the theme, and I'm kind of like in the middle with it, because I do feel like, to Disney's credit, you can't necessarily go back to the 70s and build something in that kind of era, because there's different kind of ways of building something. You want to make it more up to date, more modern, but still have that quintessential flair to, each resort. I feel like they did on the outside. However, the inner part is where I kind of have a little bit of a hard time grasping. I feel like it should be more to the culture of the Polynesian, rather than it be more of a modern contemporary kind of style.
Now, would it be fair? And then I'm going to go to Lucas. But would it be fair to say, because you brought up a good point early on, you said the Poly though is sort of rooted in the 70s, and it kind of is. And they redid the lobby and stuff recently, So the original iteration of the Poly was kind of rooted in that for its time. In the 70s, it was a modern kind of version of this theme. This seems to be a modern version of this theme. Would that be a fair assessment? Maybe like this is more today. Though, if you were to take like the modern vision for that Polynesian theme, this is the modern look at it. Where the original Poly was the modern look in that decade.
Yeah, I think Disney is trying to kind of modify it so it's more of an up to date. However, I would just put a little bit more of the Polynesian culture into this.
Okay.
Because for me, anyways, like if someone were to show me this photograph and say, "What resort is this photograph proclaiming to?" I honestly wouldn't think of the Polynesian.
That's fair. What do you think about this, Lucas? Here, I'll kind of go back to the outside. What are your thoughts on the outside, the inside, how it relates to the existing resort? Like it, love it, hate it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I have been following this resort for quite some time. Like ever since they first announced it, when Bob Chapek was still the CEO at the time, right there. And for me, I was very impressed by the design uh, of the building. It's like quite modernish, but also at the same time, it's like the current state of a lot of tropical resorts that are standing in Hawaii as of right now. So for me, I actually liked it. And then this concept art, obviously, right now is completely different from the first version of the concept art, where the paintings were quite different. And as you can see, like there's like the walls are also like now there's some embedding like marks on the walls right there. And then the color themes are quite different, because the original art that it was a bit more beige on the outside, and then the white, only a little bit more white walls and the white ceilings and everything. And the recent photos that was taken by Disservitations, that he posted, like the construction and the repainting of the current Polynesian resort, they're matching this color similar to the current Polynesian resort as of right now. So this is the final concept of the painting theme, what was before. And I get that, some people do not like the modernish design. And, to tell you the truth, like Polynesian actually, the first concept, actually was like all beige and white and modernish, original concept art, that until they changed it for the finalization with the waterfalls and everything. And you have to understand, like this whole, um, Disney, like Polynesian resort has been revamped multiple times, and the people always had like mixed feelings about it. And I do feel that the Island Tower is going to be another, like one of those things that when you might have a mixed feelings at the launch, but you'll get used to it.
Yeah.
The more you get adjusted to it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of like, you're right, Lucas. I mean, that's kind of the trend with the Disney fan community in general, is that there's a lot of pushback initially with change, right? And then a year, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years from now, it's the normal. I mean, I remember even when they recently did. When did they redo the lobby, George? Like, what, they just recently did it, right? Like maybe
for the Poly.
Yeah, wasn't it like 4 or 5 years
It
ago?
was several years ago because it was essentially just Disney's Polynesian resort, and then it became the Polynesian Village Resort.
Okay, yeah, because I remember that the village. I mean, the lobby where they have the statue and all that. They changed that up, and there was a lot of backlash on Twitter. Like, Diz Twitter was having like issues with it, And now you don't even hear about that. Like to Lucas's point, right? It's sort of like, okay, this is the poly now. You know what I'm saying? This will probably be something similar. Though there's going to be a lot of pushback, and as people get used to it, it'll kind of be a no biggie.
I like the outside aesthetics of it. It gives off that kind of like a Lonnie based kind of feel to it.
Yeah, it does.
Koalina.
Well, and then I also what Lucas was saying with the like the design work, like it almost looks like those tattoos like Maui. How it's like it looks like henna. Those henna tattoos. Yeah. It kind of has that kind of style on the building and stuff. It's pretty cool. Yeah, the inside is very modern. And it also looks, I would say, because even the poly right now, what we stayed at, the older buildings and everything, it's expensive. I mean, the polys are very expensive. This looks, though, like really expensive. Like, right? I mean, is this supposed to be, George, do we know any of these? I don't even know. Does Goose even get into that? The pricing? Because it just seems like it's going to be more expensive.
Yeah, I don't think they got into the price range for, depending on which kind of room you want to stay at. But if the regular room rate is very high, I could imagine that these, especially just being a brand new DVC, I'm for sure the room rate would be pretty high.
Yeah. Interesting stuff here.
Now, is that a working waterfall in the back? I assume.
I do feel that's a waterfall right there. That like it looks like a glass. There's a glass in front of it, but there's like a waterfall falling down kind of concept right there.
Okay, yeah. So if that actually is a working waterfall, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That would be really, really cool. I like that a lot. I was actually just you read my mind, George. I was actually just gonna mention that. That looks really cool. Yeah, we'll see how it turns out. I mean, it's coming. I mean, look at DVC. They can start booking June 4th. Do we have an opening? Let me see, December 2024. Okay, so we have a little while longer before this thing opens. But interesting stuff. Look, the Poly is an amazing place. I fell in love with it. It's kind of like my home resort now because that was my very first Walt Disney World, hotel. Yeah. So. Really cool stuff. But Lucas, any final thoughts before we move on to our next topic on anything regarding the poly that you want to add?
Yeah. So the first thing obviously is you guys talked about like how expensive it might be for the island tower. Yeah. Well, I do believe that it might not as be expensive than the bungalow itself because when they first announced bungalow, there was a massive backlash about how the DVC members were upset because there's only studio option or bungalow option, and then the bungalow is like 3 times the price of what the studio was giving, and no one can actually put their family in a like a bungalow that's limited to like 7 to 8 people within that building right there. But also the bungalow had a lot of problems right there when I first got toured. They had like a sewage issues, like the plumbing issues and everything, and also some people were complaining that the view of the like originally where they can see the fireworks and everything are now blocked by the bungalows, and then the lake shows and everything. That was also the biggest complaint that they actually had it. So that was like one of those backlashes that the Papali fans had, and now they're complaining about the Island Tower. But I have a feeling the Island Tower, they're gonna say that the point prices are gonna be much reasonable in my personal opinion. Anything that's not a penthouse of a two bedroom villas. That's what the people have been expecting for, and that's what people have been asking for. And I think they're gonna get what they've been asking for. Now, when it comes down to the color theme of the interior and then the modernization, majority of the luxurious resorts these days, it's not just the Island Tower that's doing it, like the like the resorts such as Four Seasons, and I can tell you right now, the Four Seasons, Ritz Carlton, they're not cheap resorts. They're very expensive, and they go with these themes because they know how to draw in customers to wanting to book into these places. And when it comes into the psychology of color and then the feng shui of like the vibe right there, the color, the warm color of the hotel design actually stimulates the psychology of like normal guests like us to be drawn into it. And most of the resort these days, such as Disney Worlds, um, old styles of these resorts have very dark colors, and some are not very like drawn into them, such as like Animal Kingdom resorts. It used to be popular back then, but the dark colors and everything, like they're not fully drawn in. So that's why people go to like resorts such as Grand Floridian, for example. That is the most popular resort, and they all go there because it's like the colors are very bright. Like they chose all the themes that are like very bright. Impact the beige and the light gray and then white, blue. They chose all of those in the interior redesign models right there, and now the DVCs they don't sell the points anymore in Grand Floridian because it's so popular. And the reason why it's popular is that everyone tells me exactly the same thing. It's very bright, vibrant. It draws me into that place. This is exactly why I think that's exactly the reason why Disney decided to go with a little bit more luxurious, modern, bright color-ish style of a resort because it really draws the customers in and wanting to book this place.
Well, that's a fascinating point, Lucas. Like that you mentioned that because that you're right. Where these Disney and I think hotel resort companies in general, they factor that stuff in the psychology into the equation, and a lot of fans don't really realize that. Like you were saying, like you were saying it's like a feng shui. It's a psychological thing where you're drawn to it. People don't even realize why they're maybe more drawn to to a various hotel, but it's because of these color schemes and how open and how airy and how bright, like you were saying, how it is that it even subconsciously kind of draws them in. So I think that's an interesting point, Lucas. I think that might be a factor here as to why they did what they did, because believe me, these hotel companies, including Disney, they really look at all those elements when they're building these things. What do you think about that, George? Do you think about Lucas's what we call it, this idea of the brighter color scheme sort of drawing people in, and that's kind of why like the Grand Floridian and what have you is very popular. It's kind of a an airy kind of light feeling.
Mm-hmm. And not only has he made that a great point, but I actually agree with him. I do feel some of the older resort hotels, such as he had mentioned, the Animal Kingdom Lodge, Wilderness Lodge, even the Polynesian. When you go in, you see a lot of darker colors, used, in the palette of the main center building itself. And sometimes that could be a little bit off-putting, and I do feel like the demographic nowadays is, I think subconsciously people tend to look at more brighter color combinations because it allows the optics of the eye to kind of catch forth to it and say, okay, now I could see the design, I could see the pattern, I could see everything in complete detail. Where when you have a bit of a darker rigid color, it sometimes it could be a little bit off-putting.
Well, and it's interesting too because if you look at the 70s in general, that's when what year did the Poly open, George? Do you remember?
I believe the Poly opened with
Disney World.
1971.
Yeah, 1970.
It's the first generation of the resort, just like a contemporary resort.
Gotcha. So that era, the 70s, that decade in general, if you look at like the clothing and just if you watch like old sitcoms of the 70s, everything was like dark wood, like browns, oranges, right? That was the era, you know what I'm saying? And that was like that Poly was kind of like the modern take kind of that back then,
and sometimes the darker the look, honestly, a little bit more depressing it is,
sometimes,
because again, it gives off the mood, you want that color scheme to kind of reflect of how the hotel is supposed to make you feel.
Right. So let's see how it turns out. You know, what we have right now is basically just artwork. This thing will open in December. See how it works out. You know, people that are kind of critical of it right now don't really like it. Maybe when it opens, you know, some minds will be changed, and maybe not. But it'll be interesting to see. You know, absolutely, it's a great resort. I loved it. I absolutely love the Poly. But that brings us to our next story, which is Disney requests 5-year extension for Reflections DVC hotel permit following COVID-19 delay. So it says here, and this is courtesy of Blog Mickey, by the way. A request has been filed by Disney Imagineering for a 5-year extension on permits related to the development of a new DVC resort at Fort Wilderness and campgrounds. Largely considered to be canceled, it looks like Disney wants to keep their options open for previously announced Reflections, a Disney Lakeside Lodge. So this was thought to be canceled, but they want an extension on this permit. George, what do you make of this?
I will say, if this actually comes through, this would be the biggest comeback than Robert Downey Jr. You know, so it would,
yeah.
Because I mean, I thought like this thing was like dead in the water, like thought, and honestly, and it's a shame, really, because Disney had completely like laid the gravel path for this resort. Like they cleared everything out. You know, they have it kind of, and I do know that they had some issues possibly like with the water level and the placing of it, but they said that it's still something that could be workable. But I think honestly, if they can pull it off, I would still love to see this resort come to fruition. You know, it adds another resort onto the property. It adds an extension to the Fort Wilderness, which they had just recently updated their cabins. And if you actually kind of look at the color palette for the buildings, they actually kind of match of what the newer updated cabins look like. So it would kind of fit in very well. And as I said, they know exactly where they want to put this resort. As I said, the land's already cleared out so far. They probably have more stuff to do with it, but it looks like Disney really is adamant about adding this resort to the property. And if it goes through, I say kudos to them.
Now, was there any indication from Disney that it was canceled, or was that kind of like a fan assumption because we didn't hear anything for a while?
I don't know if Disney actually used the term canceled, but I know that they didn't say they put it on hold. They just took it off the roster of like projects in the coming year. So I think it was just more so because we as fans didn't see it on the roster list. It was like, okay, it's dead and buried, you know. But we also have to take into consideration too that Disney is a company where any kind of idea can just be put on a shelf, even though we can't see it. You know, they could put it on the shelf and they can dust it off and take it off at any time.
Right. No, exactly. What do you think about this, Lucas? What are your thoughts?
So, to answer George's assumption, it was originally put into a halt, major construction during the COVID-19. Everything was put into a halt on constructions, and they just kind of like put it on the side. Never really talked about it ever again. But obviously, you know, this whole area has been kind of like what I call the cursed area ever since the closure of River Country Water Park back in the days. And you know that it has a big history of that water park and the closure of it, and they've been leaving this empty land for a very very long time until that this Reflections Disney Lakeside Lodge came up into the discussions during like 2018. And that was like around the time that they just decided to completely raise out the River Country Park that's been closed for like decades, and then make it into a lodge. And that was the case. And then the COVID-19 the pandemic came up. A lot of projects were like put into hold, like including Tron Lightspeed Run, and other parks such as Epcot's like the renovations and everything. So eventually, like, didn't really discuss about it at all. And then around 2022, I remember reading in the news they were trying to scrap this project, and then all of a sudden, like it's like you brought this up from a blog Mickey, where now they're bringing back up because they don't want to waste this empty land that they were originally going to plan on. So that really is the case where they don't want to waste any lands that are abandoned as much as possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. They, like you were saying, George, they started where they laid the gravel path and all that stuff. It's like, you might as well if you're going to start it, you might as well finish it. And why not? I mean, it looks. I mean, from the art at least, it looks pretty nice. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so how we went to. We visited your mom at was it Fort Wilderness?
Fort Wilderness, yes.
Now those are the those are the cabins. How far in relation to that is this?
This would still be a distance from the initial where the cabins are. Actually, a bigger distance than where the Polynesians DVC is from the main building. They would probably have to have, because that's the interesting thing with a Fort Wilderness Resort and Campground is it's so big that you would have to sometimes, depending on where you want to go, basically Fort Wilderness is a resort within a resort. Like sometimes you have to take buses just to get into different areas of Fort Wilderness. But I feel like the position, because River Country was kind of tucked away where it was like part of Fort Wilderness, but it really wasn't.
Right.
So I think honestly that would be sort of kind of a distance from the DVC to the original cabins. Now, at the time when my mom stayed at the cabins, they were as the original cabins of how they opened. Now that they're actually updating the cabins, as I had mentioned, they now reflect, no pun intended, the what the DVC is actually looking like with the same color, the same color scheme and architectural design.
Okay, makes sense. Interesting stuff. We'll see. I mean, 5-year extension. It looks like the article was saying. It looks like they're keeping their options open. Good. Hopefully they go through with it. And Josh Giamaro and Bob Iger has said they're going to really pump a lot of money into the Disney experiences. $60 billion. So, I mean, they're getting a huge influx of cash. Make the best of it. Why not? Absolutely. So that brings us to our next topic, which brings us all the way to Japan. And we're going to talk about Disney. I mean, Fantasy Springs. I keep wanting to call it Disney Springs. It's like, yeah. I'm so used to Disney Springs. I'm going to play without the music, obviously, because, if I play Frozen music on the channel, it's going to get copyrighted like 6 different ways, But let's kind of watch the Frozen stuff. We'll talk over it. But Lucas, overall, because we haven't had you on since this stuff has been released, what are your thoughts on this Fantasy Springs area at Tokyo from what we've seen so far?
Well, my first word I'm gonna say is breathtaking, because it really is breathtaking. And this is like every Imagineer's dream, just like how we watched the Zootopia by 6 Miles Tall's video. Like just like this, like. I think this was not exactly funded by the Disney company itself, but rather from the Tokyo Disneyland that funded this whole project. And you can clearly see how much money they threw into this just to show what they can do within Fantasy Springs. And comparing to Frozen Ever After, this whole ride is like very impressive. I could not like complain about like or any like missing points that this ride lacks of. I was also impressed by the Anna's drape that was like stuck right up there when she was frozen, and then it falls down when she recovers from the like the frozen curse. So I was really surprised by that too. So I can't really complain about this.
It's beautiful. It really is. Between the fluid animatronics that we're seeing here, the clever use of like this scene right here. Let me bring it back a little bit. The door, how it kind of pivots like that. It's almost like a Broadway show.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Like that was like when I first saw these scenes, I thought it's basically a Broadway show in the aspect of a ride, of an attraction. It's almost
Agreed.
like as if you
Agreed.
were to watch a Broadway show, but you'd be sitting in a ride vehicle and it's taking you through the motions of the story and the characters, and even to down to the technological enhancements of all the special effects that are going on around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we talked about it, George, on a video recently when Universal released. We talked about a bunch of times actually. Universal released that Super Nintendo World commercial, basically, right?
Right.
And they were bragging about, well, Donkey Kong has no screens, right? And I get why they were doing that, because it was like Universal's known for like heavy screen stuff. But my
Right.
point back then was like, well, it's like screens aren't inherently bad. Projections and stuff aren't inherently bad. We should be utilizing all the tools in our toolbox. It just, each project is different, right? So Donkey Kong, I agree. I don't think you should use screens in that. Physical is the best way to go. But I wouldn't demonize projections or screens either. And we're seeing that here with this Frozen ride, where it's seamlessly weaved into the practical effects and it's beautiful. So when done right, projections and screens are actually pretty impressive. And I'll be honest with you, I think we're going to see similar kind of technology, how we're seeing this, where it's weaved in with the practical. I think we're going to see something very similar and maybe equally as impressive with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I think we're going to see stuff like this, with the backgrounds being like, projections, the foregrounds being practical, and it interacting with each other. So I'm very optimistic, but this Frozen ride is like out of control good. I mean, this is absolutely insane. And this goes to show you that when the Imagineers have basically the right budget, and the corporate stuff kind of stays out of it, and they're able to do what they're going to do, they do great work. And this is the current crop of Imagineers. So I know a lot of people like to say, well, the old guard, was better. And look, I love the old guard. Tony Baxter, Joe Rohde. I mean, these are legends, absolute legends. But we cannot downplay what the current generation of Imagineers are doing with this stuff, because it's not just this ride. It's the entire area of Fantasy Springs. We're seeing just as equally impressive stuff over there in Zootopia. We're seeing just as equally impressive stuff over there for Arendelle in Hong Kong. These Imagineers know what they're doing. But the issue with Disney is that that in the States, in California and Florida, they're just not given the proper budget. And it maybe not even just the budget. It's probably a lot of like Burbank meddling as well, and interfering. What are your thoughts on that, George?
Oh, absolutely. And it's very telling what the end results of a project is. And we can see exactly the scope of what WDI is capable of doing, because we've seen it for over 70 plus years, that they've been doing this. And it's a multi-generational era in the company that, to work in a prestige department as WDI, it's not just someone that they pick up off the streets. It's people that, who really work their craft and know exactly what they're doing. And I feel like in any department of WDI, they know what they're doing. But as you said, they have to have the proper budget. And I feel like the corporate side of the company needs to kind of let them do their thing of what they're known for. And the founder himself, Walt Disney, let them play, so to speak. He let them do their thing. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. It's back to the drawing board. But it was never where it was the corporate side took full control over to say, oh, well, okay, well, here's a budget, you can do this, but you can't do that. And I can't necessarily say Frozen Forever After and Epcot is to that description, because basically what they did, they shoehorned Frozen into an already existing building with a track layout. So I can't necessarily say that was bad. The Imagineers, got what they had to work with, and I think they integrated that very well. Moving forward, with especially if they want Frozen to come to Disneyland, there's no excuse now. This is the kind of caliber it needs to be.
Whoa.
If they want Frozen to be at Disneyland.
You're building it at Disneyland. You'd be building it from the ground up. So you're right. This is the expectation now, and see how the ice sparkles or whatever you want to call it, the icy pixie dust, I guess you can call it, interacts with the scenes. I can see that happening with Tiana's Bayou Adventure, with the fireflies and things like that. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they weave that technology in. But what are your thoughts on that, Lucas, in terms of like the Imagineers when given the right kind of freedom and budget? What this current crop of Imagineers can actually do.
Well, I think I mentioned this once on the Twitter, like one of my tweets. I said, like, budget is really about everything. Budgets, permits, like given like freedom of budgets and given a freedom permit. Obviously, the Imagineers will go all out on everything as much as possible, but I would like to include explain put an example out of Epcot when they redid the Epcot original concept art was that they were originally going to put the fountain in the center of the world's celebrations, and they kind of like decided to cut corners because of the lack of budget right there. So here's the thing about it when it comes down to like lacking a budget, the Imagineers will end up having to cut corners, and that's just gonna like show an obvious, cutting corners that of like why this ride is lacking Imagineering efforts comparing to other parks right there. And this is where a lot of this Twitter, people, and then the Disney, the American Disney world fans out there will always complain. Why do we lack in something comparing to other parks? Because budget, budgets, lacking budgets, cutting corners, and it's too obvious to see, and that's the result of it. We always look at these how cool these concept arts are, but we never get exactly the same thing. Why? Lack of budgets and cutting corners. That's just how it always is.
And I have a question for the question for the two of you. This may be of the unpopular opinion. Now, I'm not saying we don't need this. We absolutely do need this because this is the end result when you have R&D. So for research and development, obviously, as I said, you need that department to be able to create stuff like this with a lot of experimenting and trying different things of technology. However, do you feel like Disney tends to utilize more of the budget for R&D, but at the same time they come up with great things, but it's like money wasted because they don't ever really incorporate a lot of the stuff that they create in R&D and integrate it into the theme parks? For instance, like you have the little mini droids, and it's like they created them. They're out here or there, but it's like I could imagine how much of a budget they spent on them. And it's not really like a big go-giving factor where they could have maybe utilized the R&D funds for something a little bit more that could be put towards something in the long run that would be more complacent.
Well, one of the complaints I've had for Imagineering for a long time is they would do these things like, I don't know if you guys remember Lucky the Dinosaur from like 2003.
Right.
And
I remember. I've never seen that. Yeah.
Remember Lucky? And then they would put him out in DCA for like 3 days and you never see him again. Like I like those projects and like the little droids. Actually, to be fair to Imagineering though, those in Disney, those droids are making quite a few appearances now. But typically, you're right though, George. They do these little things, these little projects. They show them off. They're like, oh, that's cool, and then you never see them again. So I would too like to see more of that cool technology that because they do. Imagineering does amazing stuff, right? When you create something really dope like that, it's we want to see it implemented more. We don't want to just have one thing, like one meet and greet for Lucky the Dino, and it disappears, and we never see stuff like that again. We want the stuff to be implemented into the parks in a permanent basis, and I think a little more frequently. This ride is a perfect example of that. I mean, every single trick in the book was implemented in this attraction. It's out of control good. But what are your thoughts, Lucas, on George's question?
I kind of do agree with him. We do see that Imagineers spend a lot of money on R&D, I'm gonna give one example of the recent videos. I don't know if you guys watched it, but Marcus Brownlee actually was able to go into Imagineer's building and try out the new treadmill, like the microchip treadmill that he was like playing with the PlayStation control on, and he was trying to walk on the same area right there. I believe that project that they were working on is probably costing multi millions of dollars into that project right there. And my and I I was so happy to see that type of project, but but at the same time I have a feeling that that project's going to be canned, or like like put it onto the side, because they don't see that project to be 100% successful, from what it seems like. But I believe that that type of multi-millions of dollars of like R&D project is is a reason why the Disney like is like losing a lot of budget on, and they're trying to cut corners, trying to develop those type of projects out there. It's very innovative, and I never seen anything like that before, because like I think that type of treadmill will be something that we will see in the distant future of like attractions rise or VR simulations within the amusement parks, such as like Disney Quest virtual reality type of games too. Um, but like, would that be like part of something that within like the big park project? No, I don't think so. So that's why like a lot of monies are being wasted on a very big innovative projects, and never being presented in an actual parks, or like or in any attractions.
Yeah, no, well said. Exactly. We see that a lot, you know. So they got to not only do they have to spend the money, but they got to spend it. They got what the money they do spend, they got to spend it correctly. They like you don't want to spend like, for example, right? Like Rocket Rods was a very expensive attraction at Disneyland, but it was money that wasn't spent very well, right? You can spend a lot and kind of blow through it in the wrong way. So they need to also allocate these funds better than they have as well too. You know, so yeah, better budgets, but also spent more efficiently. What do you think, George?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all about they do cost cutting and cost saving, but they should be a little bit more cost efficient. That money that they are willing to spend, it's put it towards something that will have longevity. That can be utilized in the parks rather than just a simple, as you had put it, like a 3-day appearance and then poof, bibbity bobbity boo, it goes away. And it's like we want to see more of this kind of technology that's being utilized in Fantasy Springs. And I hope in time Disney does come around to let Imagineering do their work of how they know what they're doing, and allow this to come into the domestic parks. Now, Lucas, if I could ask you, do you know anything more of the stipulation between the contract between Disney and OLC, as far as, because we know that it's I think it's about 5 years, that if Disney wanted to utilize anything from Tokyo Disneyland, it would be 5 years. Now, is that the IP with the ride system? Is that just the ride system? Do you know anything more on that?
That's actually a good question. I don't know too much about that. I think like it's something that maybe one of our friend Seymour Duck might know a little bit better about that, or somebody who actually is a little bit more familiar with the Tokyo Disneyland park contents. But I know OLC is like completely third party, and then they have their own budget on certain things, and they buy the IPs off Disney company itself to use the utilization and licensing, which is why they were able to implement a lot of these stuff. That goes to the same issue, same way with Hong Kong Disneyland as well as the Shanghai Disneyland. Like they're not actually owned by Disney. Like they're using the Disney, like a company, big company is using the Disney name, and while they're putting that in, they're buying the the licensing rights to use those IPs into the park. So
Yeah.
like a lot of things when they design, when they put them in, they are like using majority of the like, I'm not sure like how the loyalty budgets go when it comes down to that, but as far as I know, like OLCs like are usually in charge of like what goes around in that park and what is being added into that park right there. But anything else beyond that, I don't know how long the contract is or anything like that. It's like whether it's a 5 year or not.
Yeah, and I feel that's why, especially coming off of uh, the events of 2020, I feel like that's why Disney kind of took that opportunity to utilize the growth in the international parks, with Tokyo's Fantasy Springs, Shanghai's Zootopia, Hong Kong for Frozen. Because I feel like, well, obviously, as you had mentioned, Lucas, like OLC, pays for what goes on in their parks, and with I believe with Shanghai and Hong Kong, they don't pay all of it, but they pay portion of it, and then Disney upfronts the rest. But Disney doesn't have to pay the full 100% of what's going in Shanghai and Tokyo, or Shanghai and Hong Kong, excuse me. But so I feel like Disney kind of utilized that to kind of say, hey, you know what, we can't really do anything with the domestic parks right now, especially since Disneyland Forward, its fate is very uneven right now. The political issues that are going down in Florida for Walt Disney World, and it's like, well, we don't have to forefront out the whole 100% of these budgets for the project, so it's like, let's focus on the international parks. And I feel like that's where the 60 billion investment, majority of it is going to go for the domestic parks. 20% of it is going to also go for the cruise line. And I think, I think Hong Kong and Shanghai might get a little bit, but I think out of all the international parks, I think a big chunk is going to go for Disneyland Paris.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Asian parks just got a lot of love. Obviously, the money for that 60 billion wouldn't be. Japan's not included in that because OLC
Correct.
fits the bill for that. So, but like Hong Kong, like you said, George, they just got that amazing frozen area. Shanghai got Zootopia. They're good for, I would say, 5 years maybe. So that first half of this next decade, the first half of this next decade, I think should be definitely domestic parks and cruises. So.
I like to add in something that George kind of mentioned about the cruise and everything. So now, OLC, they really just only need to focus on the Tokyo Disneyland and everything. But when it comes down to like the Disney company itself, they're not only just focusing on the parks, but also cruise wise. So, the budgets are going to be like split all over the place, and that's just going to like going back to the where I mentioned about cutting corners, because whatever they budget they granted and release, if they start spending too much budget on cruises, then like, whatever they have left on like the parks, and if they're short on it, they're gonna have to cut budgets and cut short, like cutting corners. And that's the issue we're gonna have and come back to again, like and we just discussed. And I believe that you know, sure, cruises make a lot of money in business, but the thing is that like, without the parts, there would not happen a cruise to begin. So like,
True.
I just feel that they should really focus on the Disney Forward park project, and also like the Disney World project that they promised that they were going to like add more lands on. With that said, like they shouldn't like do all different types of project all at once, and then when the result comes in, like I hope they don't get any backlashes for like for saying, oh, we ran out of budget, so we just like had to like cut it short, kind of thing right there.
Yeah, they've been kind of pulling back on the domestic end for a while. And so when Josh gets on that D23 stage, he's got to make some big announcements, concrete announcements, and they got to deliver on those announcements. It's not enough just to announce it. Lucas is right. You got to come through with the quality. These international parks are showing us in real time what Imagineering and what Disney is absolutely capable of.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pull the trigger. Let's do it. Let's bring it here to Florida, Walt Disney World. Let's bring it here to Disneyland, And I'm telling you, the fans, Disney fans are really, really, as I say, George, right, hungry, right? They're hungry.
They're hungry.
They're hungry. The fans are so hungry for like just quality, mind-blowing stuff. You know what I'm saying? And you build that, and the fan base will reward you. They will absolutely reward you. So
yeah, and obviously, it works. Shanghai got Zootopia, Hong Kong got Frozen, Tokyo got Frozen, Tangled, and Peter Pan, and Disneyland's getting Toy Story.
George likes to mess with me. Yeah. Toy Story Land wouldn't be so bad. Like, okay, in all seriousness, if they built Toy Story Land in some like,
don't even try to make this positive. You're gonna screw up my mojo.
Right? I'm gonna ruin the joke.
I'm pretty sure. Wasn't there like the Pixar Fest, like kind of like a mixed feeling of review right there around that time, right there?
Very much so. Yeah, a lot of fans are. It's mixed or even skewed negative. Wouldn't you say, George? With the
I
fandom?
would think so. Yeah. They're kind of like in a 50-50 kind of like
it's
middle of the barrel. Yeah. But I'm sorry, bro. Didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you saying? Like if they did do it.
Yeah, no, I'm not like, I think I don't want to give the impression that it's like a terrible land, because I actually really like Slinky Dog. That was a really fun ride. But like, just for the Disneyland Forward land, they spent so much political cachet and so many years and money convincing the city to rezone those acres. It's just not. I don't think Toy Story Land, as it is presented at Hollywood Studios, is ambitious enough for that. Especially when you're dealing with Disneyland Resort, you're very limited with your space. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mind it coming to maybe DCA or something if you can do it in a way that you're working it into the existing stuff, but don't put it in like Symbolot or something like that. Like that should be saved for like Pandora or something big.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, it's how Toy Story is being represented. Like each of the lands, even into the international parks, right. I feel like they're not that strong of lands for how big of the franchise is, because they constantly say, okay, it's Andy's backyard. But what if they took a different approach where it's like, rather than have it outdoors, maybe have it indoors, where you kind of go into Andy's room and you go into Al's Toy Barn, like in the scope of a toy. So like as you enter through Al's Toy Barn, you enter through Andy's room, you are literally the size of a toy. So you see an oversized bed, you see an oversized shopping cart, oversized, where toys are everywhere. I think if they were to take that kind of approach, sort of kind of like how they did like an indoor Little Mermaid in Tokyo Disney Sea, I think that would be very, very cool. But I think to constantly keep doing this thing of saying, okay, well, you're in Andy's backyard, he has like all these play sets everywhere, and it's like to me, I just feel like it's not as immersive as it could be.
Well, in Toy Story, they've had some pretty creative shorts, animated shorts that they've done.
Yeah.
I don't know the name of it. I think it was the land that time forgot or something like that. Remember that short?
Yeah, I think I remember that. The time forgot. Yeah.
Something like that, right? With the crazy like dinosaur like warriors people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was crazy. They were like dinosaurs, but they were like these Roman like, whatever. But it was kind of cool, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, why don't they take the inspiration from those, like some of these Toy Story shorts, where it's like maybe not like a literal representation all the time of Toy Story, like you were saying, like the backyard. Maybe have the characters like kind of like cosplaying, role playing these like fantastic roles, like that short does, right? I think that'd be kind of fun too. An interesting take on Toy Story, So I don't know. I mean, you can even do like almost like what the Muppets do, like where the Muppets kind of retell stories, like Muppet Christmas Carol and stuff like that, or Muppet Treasure Island. You can even do that with Toy Story, where it's the toys playing some other franchise or some other story. You know what I'm saying? And kind of incorporate that. So, I don't know. There's so many different ways you can kind of incorporate these characters, and to always go into Annie's backyard, this, that, and the other. It's like, they could do that.
If they were to do that, I would love to see a Toy Story rendition of Goodfellas.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where my mind was going, George. Exactly. But Lucas, it was phenomenal having you on again. We'll have you on again very, very soon. You're always welcome back here on OT55. Thank you so much, sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucas, if you could remind everybody where they can find you on social media, sir.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, also known as X. The username is it's LucasKim. You can follow me right there, and then my YouTube link will be on the below with a link tree link known as the Lucas and Disney channel.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. And make sure you follow and subscribe to Mr. Lucas Kim, the Italiano. If you could remind everybody where they can find you on social media, sir.
Absolutely. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Disney George. You could also find me on Instagram under the Disney Italiano. And of course, you can find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There he is. Comment down below with all your thoughts on everything we talked about today, the fancy springs and what that means for this current crop of Imagineers. You know, like, do they have what it takes? It seems like they do. What's the problem here with the domestic parks? What are your thoughts on the Lakeside Lodge possibly coming back? Also, the new Polynesian, the DVC, the 10-story tower. What are your thoughts about that? We know you guys and gals have thoughts on that. We've seen it on Diz Twitter. So comment down below with all your thoughts. Yeah, there's been a lot of thoughts on Twitter. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Orange Grove 55.